Welcome to HECTV's live interactive program tonight that's part of St. Louis.
The whole production is pulled together.
It's going to be a steel bridge.
On the American classic novel,
the car that put America on wheels.
Welcome to HECTV Live. Good morning and welcome to HECTV Live. Today, our production is entitled Brundibar, Staging an Opera, and we're here at the Touhill Performing Arts Space on the campus of the University of Missouri St. Louis, where the Opera Theater St. Louis production of Brundibar is going to premiere this weekend. We're really glad that you're part of the program. As always with HECTV Live, we welcome everybody watching us over the web and over television to send us your email questions to live@hectv.org. That's live@hectv.org. Today, we're going to meet the stage director. We're going to talk to the videographer and set designer, the lighting designer, the costume designer, as we find out what it means to take a production and bring it to life. We're also going to see a little bit of rehearsal footage so you get a sense of what it looks like on this stage, and you're going to get a chance to find out what the Touhill is all about. We're being joined by a live group of middle school students here from Hickson Middle School in Webster Groves, Missouri, and as always, of course, we're being joined by interactive video conference participants around the country. Today we're being joined by Oak Arbor, Michigan, and Wilmer, Minnesota. We'll be coming to those groups in a little bit to see what first questions they have. But of course, it makes logical sense to start with that we talk about what is Brundibar and what is that opera. So to begin with, we're going to bring in Doug Scholz-Carlson, the stage director of the production, and Wendell Harrington, set designer and videographer. Come on over, guys.
Hey.
Hi.
Good morning. How are you?
Good.
Well, let's talk a little bit about just the two of you and some background information. And Wendell, I'll start with you first. So you're set designer, videographer. How did you get involved in this field? Where did you come from? All that good stuff.
Okay, well, I'm actually not the set designer. I'm the video designer.
Okay.
And also, I'm the adapter of the book, The Diary of Peter Gans. And how I started, and this is kind of crazy, is that I wanted to be a filmmaker and took a wrong turn one day and ended up in the theater, and I never looked back, and I'm pretty happy that I'm here.
So it wasn't a wrong turn, it was just...
It was just, you know, sometimes you have to be open to opportunity. You think you're going one way, and then an opportunity arises, and this was 30 years ago, somebody needed somebody to design some projections, and I thought, well, this is really interesting. And I stopped thinking about making movies, and I spent my time in the theater, because I love how theater is collaborative. When you work in the theater, everybody is working together as a team. When you work on a film, everybody really has their own thing that they're doing. It's not so much overlap, but in the theater, everybody's in everybody's business in a good way. It's like, what about this? What about that? And I really, really enjoyed that part of it, that you always become better because you're working with other people.
Oh, very cool. Doug, how did you get involved?
In this project in particular?
In this project in particular, and then your other expertise.
Wendell and I had worked on a production of The Grapes of Wrath, a world premiere opera at Minnesota Opera, and we took that to a number of other opera companies. So we had worked together there, and when she was working on this production of Brundibar, she got me involved in that.
Well, let's talk about this production of Brundibar. First of all, a little bit of the case history of it. It's written by a Czech composer back in 1943-ish, 38, something like that?
Well, Doug would know better.
Doug?
Yeah, I think the original composition is around 1938, 39. He had written it, he was living in Prague, and he had written it and begun rehearsal for it. And then the interesting thing about the opera, the interesting piece of history for the opera, is that he was sent to Theresienstadt concentration camp. And this was an opera designed to be performed by children for the community. And they started performing it in the concentration camp. So they did 55 performances of it in the Theresienstadt concentration camp.
Well, I had the opportunity last night to speak to Ella Weisberger, who's here for this production. Ella, who was in Theresienstadt at the time and in that production. And so it was really interesting to hear her talk about what that was like and how much it meant to them to have that opportunity to perform and the little bit of freedom it gave them.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the story of Brundibar, and then let's talk about the way it's framed for this production.
Sure. The story of Brundibar is it's a fable. Basically, it's a story about two children who need to earn money to buy milk for their ill mother, and how they try to raise that money by singing in the market square and find themselves sort of overwhelmed by the louder mechanical music of the organ grinder Brundibar. And that, you know, it's a children's fable, so of course they go to sleep and it's a dark night, and who comes to visit them but the sparrow and the cat and the dog with some good advice, and who encourage them to get a lot of children together, and the message being, well, few are not so strong, many are much stronger. And it's sort of interesting in the context of what was going on in Czechoslovakia and in Western Europe at the time, because of course the Jews were being beaten back by the very overwhelming forces of the Germans. And so that must have rung very strong in their hearts to hear that. So what happens, of course, is that the children all band together and they all come together to the market square and sing this song and drown out the evil doer of the nasty Brundibar, and are able to earn enough money for them to buy milk for their mother. And this is a great triumphal march. So the story is kind of, it's a simple story, it's a slight story, it's not, you know, Carmen or, you know, it's like nobody's dying of consumption and there's no giant murder. But it's very charming, the music is charming, and the children, you can imagine in this terrifically horrible place, getting the opportunity to sing a triumphal march and to triumph over anything, I think at that moment in time must have been a terrific release for them. And you have to understand too that they worked all day. They were fed almost nothing, and then at night they would go into this stifling hot attic and rehearse this opera. It's so moving to me to think the absolute necessity that we have within us to make something beautiful. That even though you're exhausted, you know that if you're going to go and you're going to sing and you're going to work out in a way, you're going to feel so much better tomorrow than if you just crashed in bed with your exhausted body, than if you didn't spend this 2 hours singing in this hot room with a bunch of your friends trying to get the sound just right. So that is such an inspiring story, and I think that's the reason why Brundibar, slight as it is, has lived as long, because it touches us, not just the story itself, which is charming, but also knowing that what it took for these kids to do this, not just to invest themselves in it. And I mean, kids come and perform, they do a couple of shows, and then they were gone to Auschwitz, never to return. So Brundibar carries the weight of all of that, and these kids don't die. As every time that we bring back Brundibar, all of the kids, not the ones who, just the ones who performed, but also the ones who saw it, who were charmed by it. And in the show, you see some footage from Brundibar itself in Theresienstadt, and you look at all those kids, a lot of those kids are gone. But it does kind of make your heart beat to think about what this means for us to look again, see again, think again. Don't forget.
Thank you, Wendell. Let's talk a little bit about the framing device. Peter Ginz.
Peter Ginz. Well, when I was asked to consider doing Brundibar, I really thought hard about how could I make this stick for the middle school kids, high school kids who are going to see it. Because as I said, it's not exactly a story about the Holocaust, but it's attached to it in some thin way. So I thought, well, you need to have a framing device for it. And I thought, well, the best of all possible worlds would be to find a kid that the children in the audience could identify with and have him introduce the story. So I looked around, and I was fortunate enough to come across the diary of Peter Ginz. Peter Ginz was a boy who started he was a genius boy who ended up being sent to Theresienstadt at 14. And he started to write a diary many years earlier. He had actually written his first novel at 11. He wrote, he made stories, he did drawings, just a fascinating, fascinating boy. So he kept this diary, and it's a great diary. It's not like Anne Frank. It's very different because it's a real boy's diary. And it's got all kinds of boy stuff in it. You know, I hung out with my pals. I went down here, went to the slaughterhouse. We're sailing boats. Oh, and the Mountaineers were taken away today. So interesting because it's like day by day. You know, it's like in the morning, gives the weather report. And then at school, we found out that the teacher was being sent to Poland. So he's got this kind of interesting mixture of this very boy stuff, and you know, here's my report card, and this is how I did, and tonight we had this, and today we had to hand in all our sweaters. So it's just keeps you really engaged in the story of what's going on, and he's not sappy at all. There's never any self-pity, there's never woe is me. It's very matter of fact and kind of joyous. He finds the joy in every day, and he's a reporter, so he's keeping this all together. So since he was sent to Theresienstadt, I took a little liberty, and I decided that if I made him have violin lessons and I kind of made him be musical, that when he got to Theresienstadt, we could say, oh, wouldn't you like to be in this opera? And so we kind of stuck him in the opera. And I think he does a pretty good job of telling us what was going on. And then when he gets to the camp, he gets to describe the camp, which Brundibar doesn't do. So I think that it helps the kids to understand it's not disconnected. It's not. It stands here in a historical place and does this very important task. And this boy was fantastic. He was so fascinating when you think about what he might have accomplished had he not been sent to Auschwitz and killed at 16.
So it's a fantastic framing device. I think it just works beautifully.
It was very fortunate.
Very fortunate. We want to go to the chance for kids to ask questions.
Sure.
Then we're going to have an opportunity to look at the Touhill space. So if you want to think about asking questions about the performance space here, and obviously we're going to talk about this drop in a bit and some other elements of the production. But let's go to Wilmer, Minnesota first. Wilmer, why don't you guys unmute your microphone, come in, and do you guys have a question right now? And then we'll go to Oak Arbor, Michigan, and then we'll come here to Hickson.
The story of Peter Ginz is a true story. It's an actual diary written by this young boy, Peter Ginz, and his diary was found 60 years later by his sister, Ava, who actually survived the camp. So it's absolutely true story. There's a few fictional elements insofar as I gave him violin lessons and I made him appear in Brundibar. But outside of that, everything that I've written about is true.
Wilmer, we'll be coming back to you for another question soon. Webster Groves, Hickson guys, do you guys have a question you want to ask? Come right on over, sir. Walk all the way around and come up. And as he walks around and comes up over to the stage right area, Doug, I'll ask you about what's in your mind now. You've gotten this. Did you and Wendell talk about the Peter Ginz thing to start with? Or like did in essence Wendell come to you with the Peter Ginz thing? How did all that process work?
Wendell had actually written the script for the Peter Ginz section. So she had that already completed, and then we worked on it together to edit it down into something that we thought was theatrical and interesting and would tell the story in an interesting way.
And so then let's talk a little bit about rehearsal process. You guys started rehearsals when, and how long has that been going on?
We've been rehearsing the show for about 3 weeks now, about 2.5 weeks now. All the kids have been getting together. We did casting for the show maybe about 2 months ago, so the kids have been working on the music ever since that time. And then they've had and then our young actor who's playing Peter Ginz has had about 3 weeks to work on his part.
Hello, what's your name?
Wes.
Wes, what's your question?
So, who is Brundibar?
Ah, excellent. So who is Brundibar?
Well, Brundibar is the villain of the piece, and he is an organ grinder. And the premise of the piece is that these kids, they need to earn money to buy milk for their mother so that she can get healthy again. And they try to earn money by singing in the marketplace, and they get drowned out by Brundibar because he plays this mechanical organ. The interesting thing about it is that he's got this mechanical musical skill. All he does is turn the crank on this organ grinder. And the kids have real musical skill, but it takes all of them together to get that real musical skill to produce a work of art that then earns them money that makes their mother healthy again.
Thanks very much, Wes. Hickson, be thinking of other questions you want to ask and just come right on over here and be ready to go. That's good. Wilmer, let's go to you guys for another question, then we're going to take a tour of the space here.
How large is the cast?
Doug?
Cast is 24 singers, and all young people from about age 9 to about, I think our oldest is about 15.
Now, when Wendell and when you got the commission or you knew you were going to do it here, how did the space affect the design that you were going to come up with? Let's talk a little bit about the Touhill. Let's talk about this space and the nature of how this space affected your design, and then we've got some questions from Webster Groves.
Okay. Well, first of all, I started to think about this as something that I wanted to be portable, so that potentially any school in America or any place else could perform it. And that's partly why we use projections, which you'll see later, which means that there's a lot of video images that make this production possible. There's very few moving parts. Then they said, it's the Touhill. It's gigantic here. Have you noticed? It's 1,000 students are going to come all the time. And I was thinking it's a little tiny opera with some little kids in it. So yeah, that was a little scary to think about making something that would work in a high school auditorium and also work in this giant, beautiful, elegant space that's here. So the only thing that I did was I made it a little bigger. For this space, and that's one of the good things about video is that, you know, it's like your TV. You can have a 12-inch TV, you can have a 19-inch TV, you can have a 40-inch TV. So here we are in the Touhill, and we've got a 30-foot wide video image, but if we did it at a school, we could have a 12-foot wide image, and it would be just as good. You'd still get all the information. So that was kind of the scary part. And also because it's video projection and we're projecting from the back, the way that it works is in order to get the picture a certain size, you have to be a certain amount of distance from the screen. So that means this screen gets pushed all the way forward. So you have to have enough wide space to do that. So that means that then Doug has only this amount of space for all of the action to happen, which means sometimes they're dancing sideways. But those are the decisions that you make. Yeah, it's a little, you know, Egyptian.
So we'll go to the wide camera for a moment so everybody can just see the big screen. And you'll see that. So this is a 30-foot wide.
The video screen is 30 feet wide. The drop, I think, is about 22 feet wide. And the drop was designed by Anya Klepikov. And she took a drawing. What she's basically done is, this is somewhat a view of Prague, and somewhat, it's kind of a riff off on the actual drop that they used in Brundibar. We didn't want to duplicate it exactly. We wanted to have something, but something that called to it. So Anya Klepikov is a wonderful designer who was my student at Yale. I asked her to come up with this drop, and so she has. And also, all of the imagery that you'll see, all the video imagery, is all black and white. It's all historical. It's all from the 40s, no color film. And it's always important that when we come to Brundibar, how it works is when you come into the theater, you don't see this. And when we get to the Brundibar part, this comes in. Because it's about the freedom that the kids enjoy. I'm in this terrible place, I'm in this bad situation. And then when the kids get to perform Brundibar, one of the best things is they get to rip off their yellow stars. And in comes this beautiful color drop. So it's also a little bit about the power of music and theater to alleviate suffering. That here comes the color in our lives. And that's the thing everybody knows, that you know that when you feel really low, if you sing a little, you feel a lot better. And can you imagine how terrible this could have been and how important the singing would have been? So that's the whole point of doing this show for you. We want you to know about Brundibar, and we want you to know about the Holocaust, but we really want you to know about how healing music is.
Perfect. There's there's about another 40 feet of space that they could use behind this drop here. And so I would say the projection unit is probably about, what, 20 feet back?
20 feet back. I don't know. Eric would know better. I'm not good with the number
let's find out
thing.
some questions here from the kids at Hickson. Come right on over. And your name is?
Logan.
What's your question, Logan?
My question is, what happened to Peter's parents?
Do we know?
Yes. Well, Peter's mother was Christian, and so she never went away to the camp. Peter's father did go to the camp, and along with his sister, but they both survived. And so at the end of the war, both of them came back home. And the mother, it's written in a book that I read, the mother looking out the window every day, waiting, hoping, praying for them to come home, saw her husband and her daughter. And they waited and they waited and they waited. It wasn't until 10 years later that they actually knew that Peter was dead. Because for a long time, people were lost, you know, after the war. It was like a long time before people were actually reunited. But the dad lived and the sister lived. The sister still lives. She's Chava Pressburger and lives in Israel and has become a painter.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for the question very much. Come right on over. Hello, you are?
Ireland.
Ireland, what a cool name. What's your question?
My question is, how long did it take to create Brundibar?
The composition of the opera?
How long did it take to create Brundibar? Well, in the camp, they did it over the course of about a year and a half, I think, was the amount of time that they were performing it. I don't know how long they rehearsed it in the camp. I think it took them quite a bit of time because basically they had to sneak around when the Nazis weren't watching them, when their guards weren't watching them. The Germans used Theresienstadt, the concentration camp they were in, as a model concentration camp. So they brought in the Red Cross and other observers to see this concentration camp, and then they could show them, look, a concentration camp isn't a bad place. The kids are doing opera. So they were allowed to rehearse this, but they weren't allowed the kind of freedom that we have to, you know, come to rehearsal every day. So I imagine it took them quite a bit of time. The composer also had to change the instruments that were in the orchestra just based on what he happened to have in the camp. And I'm sure they had to change the design of the production around so that it would work in the camp. So I think it took them quite a bit of a time to pull it together.
Thank you, Ireland. Let's go back to Wilmer, Minnesota. Wilmer, a question from you?
What's the music like? Style?
You know, it's really interesting. It is of that time period of the sort of late 30s and 40s. So you can, if you listen to it, you can hear a little bit of Kurt Weill in it. There's points where you maybe hear something that sounds a little bit like Debussy. There's times where you hear sort of jazzy stuff that sounds a little bit like Gershwin. It's a mix of styles. Hans Krause, the composer, this is the major work that we have of his, but there are a couple of other pieces of his. It's interesting to speculate what he might have come up with if he had survived the war.
Well, then we'll move forward with seeing a little excerpt from the rehearsal yesterday.
Great.
We've got a small scene from rehearsal yesterday, so you all are able to see costumes and the way the set works actually in the production itself, and then we can talk about elements related to the production. We're going to add in the costume designer and our light designer.
And should we mention that we're going to see the it's the Peter Gintz section?
Yes, this is the Peter Gintz section of the performance.
They're leaving from Poland. On Sunday, they weren't yet registered. On Tuesday, they registered. And on Wednesday, they are called off.
At night, as usual.
We received a letter from the Jewish community ordering us to go to Regner Street and sign a paper that promises that we will not sell or give anything to the Aryans. What do I do about Mother's birthday? At school, I was called on to help carry the luggage of the people who were leaving on the new transport to Poland. I waited the entire afternoon just to receive a pass, because Jews are not allowed on the street before 6 a.m.
Wendell, just to give us context, that's
Sure.
Peter who's talking, and the other kids are?
It's his friend Popper
Okay.
and his sister Ava. And what they're doing, they're stuffing bags with sawdust. And Peter talks about how even though it was a holiday, they were called to school that day, and everybody was asked to stuff these sacks with sawdust. And what happens was they would stuff them with sawdust. They would be taken to this place, the Vellatrini Palace, where they would hold the Jewish people for a number of days before they were shipped out. And what they did is they used those sawdust stuffed sacks
Easy for you to say.
for them to sleep on while they were there for a few days. So, and then the next thing that happens, the sister comes in and she's got a notice in her hand. They received a letter that said the Jews are no longer allowed to either sell anything or give anything to Aryans. Aryans means Christians, people who are not Jewish. Now, in Peter's case, his mother is not Jewish. So he says, what am I going to do about Mother's birthday? This is a real problem. What do I do? So it's just, can you imagine an awful time where somebody tells you you can't give your mother a present because you're Jewish? But it's your mommy.
And I noticed, Doug, and I know you have to leave us in about 5 minutes to do an interview with KWMU so people can find out more about the production of Brundibar in case they would like to come to the performance this weekend at the Touhill Performing Arts Center on the campus of the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Shameless plug. What the heck? I noticed behind us in that scene we just saw, it looked like words projected onto the screen. What's the projection that's happening there then?
Yeah, there's a photograph. It's a projection of, it's actually a picture of Peter's family, and then there's a letter projected over the top of it. I think what you can see from the clip is in the Peter Gintz section when they're living in Prague and then going to the concentration camp that things are very sort of gray and sepia tone. There's not a lot of color. And then when we come into the world of the imagination, when we come into Brundibar, we imagine what that felt like for the kids, taking off the yellow stars, and we imagine that that's much more colorful. And that's when we come into this world of this drop where everything becomes colorful.
Well, let's get a couple more questions from kids before you have to leave us,
Great.
Doug. Let's go to Wilmer first, and then we'll ask some kids from Hickson to come on over. Wilmer, go ahead.
Could we actually hear one of the songs?
That's a very good question.
We're not able to give you the music today. We actually they're still dealing with some rights issues in relationship to that, and so we're not able to give you the music today. No, but previous production that we did on the rehearsal, we had some excerpts from it, and so if you will be able to hear it then. Doug, anything else you want to offer?
Well, you will see, there is a live broadcast coming up where
Yes.
you will be able to see online, you'll be able to see the entire production. Just so you understand, this has to do with the copyright, who owns the music for it, and people who own the music, the composers need to get paid, so that's how they get paid, and we're sorting that out.
So actually, that's good for everybody to know. 7 o'clock,
Yes.
Thursday night, hectv.org, if you're watching on the web, channel 26 in St. Louis or 99 on UVerse, we will actually be showing the performance of Brundibar live.
Right,
So,
or you can come here to the Touhill, 7 o'clock Thursday night or 10 o'clock Saturday morning. are the public performances.
So Wilmer, I know you probably can't make it to the Touhill Live, but if you can make it on hectv.org, then you'll see it. Come on over, ladies, and let's see what question you've got. Hi.
Hi. My name is Liz, and my question is, when was the original performance of Brundibar?
You know, I've read a couple of different things. I believe there was an original performance in Prague that they did, but the main performances of it were done in Theresienstadt, and it's right around 1943 and 44 is when they were doing the performances. There are a number of stories from some of the original performers. For instance, the young boy who played the Sparrow was rehearsing the opera in Prague and was sent off to the concentration camp and never had the opportunity to perform it. He was replaced before he ever had the chance. There's another young boy, his name was Hansa, who performed the role of Brundibar and apparently became quite a celebrity in the Theresienstadt concentration camp, and he did all 55 performances.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much for your question. And one more from here. Come right on over. Yes, ma'am?
My name's Emily, and my question is, do any of the characters in Brundibar resemble any actual people from the Holocaust?
It's a really excellent question. Yeah, the role of the character of Brundibar himself, Ella Weisberger, who will be here for the performance, she played the cat in all 55 performances in Theresienstadt, and she survived the Holocaust, said that for them Brundibar represented Hitler. That he was very distinctly that. Now, they had to be very careful because insulting Hitler was really not allowed, but they managed to sneak in this commentary sort of right under the Nazis' noses.
Thank you very much for that question, and come right on over.
My name's Sarah, and my question is, how did you hear about Peter's story?
I read a review in the New York Times reviews, and I thought, whoa, this sounds really interesting, and I searched him out and I found it. And the reason the book got published, I will tell you, is that there was an astronaut from Israel, and he was going up in the shuttle, and he wanted to take something representing someone who perished. And he found Peter Ginz, who was fascinated by Jules Verne and drew rocket ships all the time and trips to the moon. So he found this drawing of the trip to the moon, and he says, I'm taking this into space. And so when that happened, actually, the person who had the diaries in his attic for 60 years put two and two together and was able to connect the diary that was lost in this attic back to the sister again. So it's a great story in every way, except for losing Peter.
Thanks for the question. And Doug, thanks so much for being here.
Great.
I know you have to head out, but we're very glad that you were able to join us.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go off to KWMU and publicize the fact that it's Thursday and Saturday, just one more time for everybody who's in the local area. And Wendell, I think this would be a good time to bring up your projection assistant, Eric Pearson, and also for our lighting designer to join us as well. So I'll have the two of them come up, because we're going to talk about some examples of lighting and see some of those lovely video projections at work. Kim, thanks so much. And Eric, I'll have you join me over here since that way we'll just be a little bit balanced. We'll be boy, boy, girl, girl, as it were. So Kim, feel free to introduce yourself and let everybody know. Oh, you're the one without the microphone. Oh, pardon me, Wendell. I'll just let you, we'll go girl,
I'm going
boy,
to go
girl,
get my
boy.
books.
Let's talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up in lighting design and that kind of good stuff.
I'm from St. Louis, so you too can get into lighting design. I grew up in West County. I went to Rockwood School District. I started doing theater in high school when my sister was sick one day, and they decided I knew what she knew. And went on to college and graduate school, and ultimately ended up back in St. Louis and I actually work full-time for the Touhill, as well as have an active freelance career with like Hot City Theater and other companies. And I was asked to do this project by Opera Theater in general.
Very cool, very cool. And Eric, projection assistant projection, associate projectionist.
You got it.
All right, so tell me, how did you and Wendell hook up, and what is it you get to do?
Well, I met Wendell while at graduate school at the Yale School of Drama, where she teaches, and I had some experience working as a projection designer myself out in San Francisco before coming to school. And I asked her if she would grant me the opportunity to come work with her, because she's very good. So my job, I started about a month ago. I went down to the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. and went through their archives and looked at photos and videos, well, originally films transferred to video, from the 30s and 40s, and we selected sections that we thought would be useful to help tell Peter's story. And then we brought them together and put them on a computer, and now my job is Wendell comes up with these great ideas, and I sit behind a computer and turn them into a big movie that plays behind the actors.
Very cool. And we're going to have a chance to see that. Wendell, though, let's talk a little bit about where your ideas came from. You've got a book here you'd like to share, and how did you come up with the concept, and how did you select images, that kind of thing?
Well, I just wanted to show you, here's the book. This is the Diary of Peter Gins, and it's available, and you can read it. So if anybody wants to know more about this story. And this is another book, and while Peter was in the camps, he started a magazine. I mean, can you imagine the energy that it must have taken to do that? They put out a magazine called Vedem, which means we lead, with the boys in his barracks. They put out a magazine every Friday for 2 years. I mean, this was written on scraps of paper in their spare time. And so here's a book that has essentially all of the existing articles from those magazines. It's not tales of woe. They're writing fantasies. They're telling stories. So it's just a good thing to know that exists, because we don't have so much great literature that kids could find really interesting and about them. And I think these are good books for you to know. So in terms of the research, well, first you write the story, and then you figure out what does it take to show the story. And the first place you go is to the United States Holocaust Museum, which is in Washington, D.C. And that is a fantastic archive. And if anybody ever is in Washington for any reason, I urge you to go to that museum. It's a beautiful museum. It's very touching place to go, and the archive is fantastic, and the archivists are amazing. I was there once when some girl who came in on a school trip walked up to the archive and didn't really know what she was asking, but said, "My grandfather came from this town." And they went right to the shelf, pulled down a book, and said, "Do you know what street he was on?"
Oh,
and they started flipping through pictures and saying, "Maybe we can find him. These were his neighbors. What street was it?" And they really have it down. So you can go there and you can say, "Okay, I want to know about Prague just before the war. What did that look like? Here it is. You know, I want to see the films from Theresienstadt. Here it is." So it's beautifully organized. So you just go there and you try to figure what are the best ways to tell the story. And you're looking for images that are graphically gripping, truthful, and will help to tell your story.
We're going to begin to see some images as we look at lighting, and then we'll talk about how you did the lighting design and how they all blend together with the video images as well. I'm going to ask our handheld camera person, if he can, to come on stage and show the fly gallery, which may or may not come in too clearly over there to the right on the rail where Kenny is. What we're going to see, the cue I think that Eric's going to show us, that you're going to show us, is from the very beginning of the production. So the drop is not down at that point. So what Kenny's going to do, obviously, is fly the drop for us. Kenny, take it away. Go ahead and fly up the drop. And they have a fabulous fly gallery here. And actually what you're seeing now behind as we bring a lighting cue down, and something tells me this might be a lighting cue that Kim designed, is that we actually, in essence, see a different view of the street of Prague. Is that true?
Yes, but Eric has to go over there and make it go.
Make it go. All right.
He's going to go over there and make it go. So the first thing that you'll see when you come into the theater is a picture of the drop. So you're not getting the whole story, but this is actually actually it was a sketch that we had made of the drop before we made the drop. Not that I made, because I don't do much with my hands, but look at pictures. But the talented Anya Klepikov did. So whenever you're ready, Eric, take it away. And this is when Peter comes out and he talks about, "This is my beautiful city, Prague." And so we get to see Prague, so you get a little sense of what it looked like. And I live at home with my mother and my sister. My mother's Christian, my father's Jewish, and I'm really lucky because I get to have Christmas and Hanukkah. And that's how we get to know something about Peter. So these are, you can keep going. And then he says, and I play the violin, I have to go for lessons, but I really be rather hanging out with my friend Popper. So here we are, and we stop here, and then Popper comes out, and we do a little scene here. So that's the kind of stuff that we're doing. It's absolutely authentic. It's absolutely positively Prague at the period of time. Those are not Peter's home movies. Those are actually another person who perished's home movies, but these are the kinds of things that you can find. And I think, there's truth and there's theatrical truth. And the thing is, as long as it's honestly what it is, I believe that it's okay for you to infer that it's Peter's home movies.
I agree with that, Wendell. That's phenomenal. Let's go to, and come on back and join us again, Kim, because let's go to some questions from Wilmer and then see if our kids from Webster Groves here have any questions about those technical elements, about the videography, et cetera, how it's all done and how the lighting works with it. Wilmer, a couple of questions from you guys?
How long did it take you to find all the different pictures for the background?
I went to the Holocaust Museum and I was there for 2 days, and then Eric went for 1 day, and so it takes a while to find them, and then it takes a while to acquire them, because then you have to ask everybody permission to use it. So finding them is easy, acquiring them is hard.
Good question, Wilmer. A second question from you guys?
For the music, do you use a live pit orchestra?
We have a fantastic pit orchestra, and it's a children's orchestra. I don't know, somebody else might know better than I what the ages are of the kids, but I'm completely impressed by their playing. They play so beautifully, and they're all very young.
They're high school students. They're part of the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra, and actually I'll walk toward the edge of the stage here, and hopefully we can get the pit. I'm not going to dangle my foot, no, dangerously over the pit, but you'll see the pit right here. You'll see the grand piano. You'll see the orchestra. They are members of the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra and some other students who will be part of the pit. It's a live music that'll be playing during the production. And the pit moves up and down. This is a phenomenal facility here at the Touhill. But the pit moves up and down. You can set it at different levels, so you can use it as additional performance space as well as a place for people to play music, that kind of thing. Come right on over, dear. We've got a question coming up from Hickson. Hi.
My question is, where is this video being projected from? Because I see it's not shadowed on you guys.
Oh, very good. The use of rear screen rather than front projection. Wendell?
Right, well, we're projecting from the back, and that's why we're so shallow here, because it has to be far away up there. So there are 2 projectors actually hanging from a pipe about 20 feet upstage.
Drew, our handheld camera person, is going backstage, and you see us, waving backstage waving up back there. And Drew's going on back, and you see the backstage area right now. So you see what the projection looks like from the rear, so to speak. And then you're going to see and you've got 2 projectors?
2 projectors, yeah.
And Drew, if you go to your right a little bit, we'll see the projector. Go to your right a little bit, and we'll see the projector in the screen. Pan to the right, and hold it right there. There we go, and there we see the projectors. And then, so how does the projector get the image? Where's the image coming from?
The image is coming from the computer, which is out there. It's all stored in a timeline. So it's like we have this movie, this movie, this movie, this movie, and it's like on a long thread, and you say, go now, go now, go now, go now. So it's an organizational issue. I want this one, now I want this one. So we set it all up, and it goes like that. And it's 2 projectors, basically, so that we can get the picture bigger. So that what we're doing is we're overlapping 2 of them, so you can get a wider picture than we could get with just 1.
Great question. Thanks very much. Let's talk a little bit about the lighting design that goes along with this. Obviously, you want to see the projections, but you also, I assume, want to establish some additional atmosphere with the light design, and there would be moments in time where we have to separate performance areas, that kind of thing. Talk about what it's like to do the light design and how do you go about that process?
We've talked about the 2 elements of the show, the Peter Gibbs story and the story of Brundibar, and we wanted to keep them emotionally different. So at the beginning of the show, when we hear from Peter Gibbs, we have a starker world, a world where we live in memory, and we see him talking about his life and his family, and we want to keep that less colorful and more truthful in terms of color and light and how he feels at the time. And then we go to this magical, exciting world of the opera, where these children have all gathered together to create this piece of art. And so the feeling for that is very different. We go to a happier place, although it has its moments of darkness and fear. We go to a generally happier place until the end, the worlds come together. Technically, there's some challenges in keeping the light off the screen as much as possible, but Wendell is obviously extremely skilled, and she tells me how to make her life better, and we work together on making sure that the whole picture feels appropriate for the piece at the time. So it's different at the beginning. Like we said, the drop is not in at the beginning, and we make sure that we can see each person specifically, and then for the opera part, the drop comes in, and it's more about the giant mood as the whole.
Very cool. Let's go to some additional questions. Wilmer, another question from you, and I'll have the Hickson person come right on over as Wilmer asks their question. Go for it, Wilmer.
Is there any other set besides the screen?
Wendell?
There's not any more set, but there are some fantastic props. And again, we're trying to think about making something that was really portable and that could, hopefully any school could have it, and it doesn't take much space to store it. So what we have is when we go to the marketplace, we have the milk seller and we have the flower seller, and they're holding these terrific trays that would be what we would think of as like market stalls, but they walk with them. And they are very charming, and they are designed by the same designer, Anya Klepikov, so that's really in the same style and adds color pieces to the set. We don't have a lot of space here, so the idea of kind of bringing stuff out and leaving it on the set is not such a good idea, especially if you want to do a little movement.
Yeah, we've got, what, 10 feet? 12 feet, maybe?
Something
like that. A question?
Does somebody have to run those videos, or do they run on their own?
Yes, there's somebody who will come and run those videos. Won't be Eric, but there's a young man called Evan, and he will come and and there's a stage manager. You know how that works? There's a stage manager. She's sitting over at the side. She's reading a script, and it's like Q4, go. Q6, go. And he goes there, and it's really complicated. He has to go like this on the space bar. So he has to like work his finger so he's really well rested and press that space bar just right.
Computers have made a huge difference in lighting design. Way back when Tim had hair and was in college, and one of his majors was theater, it was a little different experience when I was doing a lighting design and working the light board.
Well, exactly. We don't even have to pull the ropes
know.
anymore, you know. It's just like press that button. So, you know, keep your fingers like, you know, really supple. That doesn't mean this. That means, you know, a little exercise.
Thanks very much for your question. We've got an email question, and don't forget, folks, you can email us your questions to live@hectv.org. If people want to do this production, do they purchase the rights to the images and everything?
I think that, you know, those are things that I don't understand. But if you talk to Opera Theater of St. Louis, yes, basically what I think we would do is, as I have set it up right now, the Opera Theater of St. Louis has use of it. But I think that we could get a blanket, now that we know who owns what, and we would say, over this period of time, so-and-so wants to use it. It's not a fortune in money. I mean, just don't get me wrong. It's more the time that it takes. You know, it's like $25 here, $30 there for this picture, that picture. But it's more like getting hold of this person in Czechoslovakia who owns the rights to that. But all of that work has been done. So renting it, I don't think it would be difficult.
So you guys have seen the lighting, you've seen the set, and of course there's kids who are actually in the performance, and they have to wear something, at least that's my understanding. So I'm going to invite Stacy Snyder to join us, who's the costume designer as well, so we can talk about how she came up with the costume design idea, so be thinking about what questions you might want to ask Stacy as well. Thanks so much for being here. And I'm going to lay this down because we're going to have things to hold, I see. So let's start with just where do you come from and what got you interested in costume design?
Well, I started out living in Missouri, but I didn't move to St. Louis till I was in high school. But I needed a summer job when I was in college to make some money, and I started in the wardrobe department at Opera Theater of St. Louis as a dresser in 1996, and I've never left. So I went year-round in '99, and I'm now the assistant costume shop manager full-time with the company.
Well, congratulations. That's fantastic. So put us inside the head of a costume designer. How does it all work? You take the script that Wendell's given you. What's the process you go through?
Well, the first person I really talked to in detail was Doug, the director, and we really focused first on the Peter Gint section. We wanted it sepia-toned. I looked at a whole lot of the period research, and we really wanted Peter to look as close to Peter. I mean, it's the same hairstyle in the show. He's got a lot of the same looks, and actually there's this section on the board.
I'll let you hold that one.
Thanks. Let's see. The final board has a bottom section of his family. Okay. And so if you look at him, he's got this big side part. He wore, I mean, it's just precious, and has these little shirts and coats and vests. And so we started with that look. And then for Brundibar, as we've talked about, we wanted bright colors, and we really wanted it to pop. So we went to bright colors for that. The whole production process is a big collaboration, and so this is a big space. And once we got this set and the video and all the lighting up, we started tweaking things this week with the costumes. So for the Big Peter section, we've looked at things, and now we've actually started dyeing some things down to make them even darker. That's one element you can do with costumes to distress more. There's a pair of shorts being dyed brown today, actually, that one of the boys is wearing. For the big scenes in Brundibar, you take a simple color like white, like a period milkman costume is a white short sleeve white shirt, black belt, black tie, white pants. On this stage, and with all the lighting, the white in the show is blinding. So we took a tea technique, and so for last night's dress rehearsal, they were on stage again, but they've been soaked in a tea bath essentially for a dyeing technique, and so they're all a little bit duller, costume colors of white now. One of my favorite costumes is Brundibar's, because he does represent Hitler, so to speak. He has a big handlebar mustache, so it's not in your face with this mustache. But the color of his costumes are red, white, and black, and I'll let you all think about what that could possibly mean. And he does have a yellow sash, and that is the main pop of yellow, since they didn't wear their yellow stars, to show control over the color, is why he has that sash on his costume.
Very cool. I saw the handlebar mustache backstage. Thought seriously about putting on some spirit gum and wearing it, but decided I probably shouldn't. So, Wendell, I'll have you assist me here. You'll take the top one off.
Sorry.
No, that's no worry, no worry. And then what do we have actually here? This is an image of the students who were performing in Brundibar originally, correct?
You will see this jumper on stage in the Brundibar set. Little girl Halima wears that. You'll see that a bunch of the girls had short skirts because they were children and they're above their knees. The older women in the camp would have come in with longer skirts. So we've been trying to make, especially when you've got 15 and 16-year-olds that are 5'8" and 5'9", you want them to look more childlike. So we've given some of them shorter skirts, and some of them have slightly longer ones because their legs are so long. But we also have 8-year-olds in the show. So you have to then make them not look like their skirts are dragging the floor. And all the boys, you can see, are in shorts and short sleeve shirts and vests. But this was a big inspiration of obviously the cast photo of Brundibar. I mean, he has the neck scarf, he's got the coat. Ella has taught us so much about the cat, and she's got the book, The Cat with the Yellow Star. And she talks about how she used shoe polish for her makeup and things like that, because they had to use what they found in the camp. So we are using makeup for the animals. I know in some productions they've used masks, but we wanted it to look more like this world. And we know that she wore her mom's black sweater and her sister's black pants, so she is in black pants and in a black sweater, just with a little few flourishes to make it look a little bit, more opera-esque.
Very opera-esque. That's a cool word. Let's see what questions our students have about costumes and anything else. So Wilmer, Minnesota, let's go to you guys for a couple of questions, and then we'll go to some folks here from Hickson.
How long did it take to make the costumes?
A lot of the costumes were purchased from places like Goodwill, and then for some of the more colorful pieces were newer things. I started on the design probably 3 months ago with research and starting to pull things and making certain elements. So it is a long process, and I actually will be sewing for about 4 hours today before tonight's dress rehearsal. Because after every dress rehearsal you have alteration notes. So the sewing will continue probably until the show ends, because someone's always going to rip out their pants or have some kind of trauma with their costume on stage.
Very cool. We've seen this video quite a bit. I'd like us to go back to the drop a little bit, and we'll bring up the lights so we can get a little bit brighter, and we can talk about. You'll see that element since we talk about the costumes in the Brundibar set. We'll see the drop. Go ahead and bring it down, Kenny. Wilmer, do you guys have another question?
Are there any colors other than just the sepia tones?
Yes, once we hit Brundibar, you see greens and blues and reds and purples and all of those colors come into play. You also see a lot of plaid fabrics, because a lot of plaid is what would have, really worked back then, to help also tone down the fact you don't want someone in a bright color, just completely solid color. It ended up being too much. We started with some of that, and we've toned it down just a little bit, but it's still very powerful with color.
Very cool. Come right on over, students. Stacy, if you and I will just flip spaces, and I'll let you hold those so we can go to the last one as well. Come right on over. Your name is?
I'm Mel.
Mel, what's your question?
I was wondering, what was it about each character that helped you choose their specific costumes?
Well, so much of it is not just character, it's what the singer looks like. And the children, honestly, they had a lot to say about what they wanted to wear as well. They were each assigned somebody from the camp and had a story to study. So we came in, we saw what fit them and what looked best with their skin tone and their hair, and we tried to decide who was what child in the picture and go from there. So the kids had a lot of input, which I felt was good with the whole learning process for them too.
Very good. Thank you for that question. Come right on over. Go right ahead.
I was wondering, how do the kids' costumes change depending on how they're feeling and where they are?
Oh, interesting.
Well, for the beginning section, like I said, they're in the sepia tone, darker colors. Now, when they start being sent off to the concentration camp, and you do see that as they all start to walk by, then you start to see big coats, bulky coats, scarves, sweaters, really dark browns, really dark, depressing colors, because when they went to the camps, they wore several layers of clothing. So we wanted them to look bulky. And then Brundibar was a happy time. So that's when all of a sudden we've got color, we have the removal of the stars so they could be free and be happy. And even when it gets to be, some moments that are meaningful within Brundibar, it's still a happy, meaningful. So.
Thank you for the question. Wilmer, another question from you, and I'll invite Wes to come back and join us. Wilmer, go right ahead.
So basically, is this production the story of Peter Gins and his whole happenings through concentration camp?
It's basically, we're using Peter Gins as an entree into Brundibar, but I think the whole thing stands together pretty well as a piece. Brundibar by itself is delightful, but it doesn't tell you anything really about the Holocaust. If you want to use Brundibar to teach the Holocaust, then I think that using the Peter Gins wraparound, because there's a beginning and an end to it, helps you to contextualize Brundibar, which was my goal when they asked me to be a part of the production, was how could I deliver this whole story, the delight of the music and the color and the charm of the story, and at the same time help the kids find a way into understanding the Holocaust, which is really incredibly difficult to understand. It's almost impossible to believe. And we use Peter Gins as our way in. If you get to know him, you get to care about him, and you get to understand what happened to him, hopefully it makes what happened in the Holocaust stick with you a little bit longer. That's my goal.
Wes, question?
So, are you saying somebody gets dressed up as a cat in this?
We have a cat, we have a dog, and we have a sparrow. All three animals are in the production, and I have to say they are precious, and the kids who play them are precious, and it's really fun. It's really fun. I hope you all get to see it.
Thanks for the question, Wes. We've got just about 4 minutes left, so Wilmer, I want you to be thinking about a final question or two that you might desperately want to be asking, and Hickson, a final question from you guys, but I want to let each of you come on closer, and we'll group up a little bit and see if there's any final words you'd like to offer from your perspective on the production that you definitely would want the kids to understand in terms of like your relationship to the production. So Kim, I'll start with you. Anything else about lighting design that we haven't chatted about you'd like the kids to get a sense of?
I don't have a mic.
Oh, I'll come over to you then, and we can do that.
I feel so much in common with Peter Gins. My mother is Christian. My father was Jewish. I grew up learning about Christmas and Hanukkah. The story is so compelling to me as an adult and as a childlike adult. There's so much to see and feel in this production, and yet it ends hopeful. It's so strong to me that the way Wendell has framed this piece with Peter Gins, it makes you relate it makes you feel his heart, and all we can do as designers is make that story blossom. And I hope that what you'll see is the children really take part in this production, and then you as an audience will feel it as well. It's such a beautiful production, and I hope everybody gets to see it.
HECTV.org, Thursday at 7 p.m. if you're watching over the web. And, of course, you can come here to the Touhill. I'll come around to Stacy. We'll give Wendell the last word. But, Stacy, what would you like to say?
Always design and work for productions that you feel powerful about and emotional about. This piece, for all the research, going to the wonderful St. Louis Holocaust Museum, the whole story of Peter is unbelievably amazing. And I worked Brundibar actually when we did it the first time back in the late 90s, and I was a dresser. And it was so meaningful then, but it's so much more now that I'm older and I understand it all so much better. And the first time I saw it in this space with all the elements, I was in total tears at the end. And I think that says a lot when you know a piece so well and you're so well versed in it, and then it's still to watch it moves you. It's powerful. So I always design and be involved in things you have a passion for would be my
Wendell?
I'm so excited about this production. I've been living with Peter Ginns for 3 years now. I feel like he's my brother, my son, my husband, everything. I just and I care so much about this. As I was raised Catholic, Italian Catholic girl from Queens, but as a young girl, I met men with tattoos on their arms, and I remember being a silly 5-year-old saying, "Why do you have your phone number on your arm?" And when I understood what the answer was, and I began, even as a child, to understand what had happened in the camps, I became fascinated by it. And it's been something that I've worked on a number of productions to try to have this story told. So it's very important to me for this to have happened. And also, it's the two things. Yes, it's understanding the Holocaust, certainly, but to understand the nourishment of music and art. That is the real story of Peter Ginns, that what kept him going in this terrible time, and what kept so many people in Theresienstadt and other camps, and in every circumstance of trouble that we have now, is if you see what is beautiful in this world, you can get through anything. So that's the purpose of this show.
Thank you very much, Wendell. That's beautifully said. And on that note, we'll be ending. Wilmer, Minnesota, if you've got more questions, you can email them to us at live@hectv.org, and we'll be happy to send them to you. Thanks for joining us, Wilmer. Thanks to the students here from Hickson Middle School, of course, Kim and Stacy and Wendell and Eric and Doug, who's gone to KWMU. Thanks for everybody. We'll be live here on Thursday for 1, a 6 o'clock red carpet show, 2, 6:30 interview with Ella Weisberger, who was in the production of Brundibar, 3, the live performance here at 7 o'clock, then a little 15-minute thing with Timothy O'Leary from Opera Theater St. Louis, and then Stories of the Holocaust, an hour program after. Thanks for being part of HECTV Live, everybody. See you next Thursday.